So it took all that time for someone to say that I wasn't recording. Thank you so much. I wasn't live and audio, and people probably left because they're like, there's no audio. So that is off to a great start on my impromptu podcast. That's what happens when I do a podcast on a Sunday. So let me start over. Welcome to an incompetently started edition of the Criminal Defense Essentials podcast. And this podcast is where I normally talk about criminal law, which is what I'll be talking about today. But normally, what I do is discuss how the criminal law works in a podcast that is largely designed for people who practice criminal law. It's not as much for the general public normally, though I think the general public would be interested in it. I think that they will struggle with some of the jargon because I do tend to speak more to criminal defense lawyers. I also, believe it or not, have another podcast that I run with my kids. Yes, I do a podcast with my kids. That podcast, if you're more into something that's a little less jargony, I hope you all know what jargon means. I'm sure you do, but jargony, just all the code words that defense lawyers use. That podcast is called the Translating Criminal Law Podcast. That is meant for people and their kids. But honestly, I think you might enjoy it no matter what. If you are interested in learning more about criminal law, we've done 20 of them or so, just about. So that's really interesting. But today I'm going to do a podcast that's sort of a mix of the two. And just give me one moment. I'm just going to tweet again that I'm doing this. I am now live with the volume fixed. If you want to come learn about convoy laws, sorry for the clicking, but that's what I'm doing right now. Oh, and of course, I almost tweeted the wrong thing, but I'm going to fix that too. So why am I trying to do this? The reason is really quite straightforward. I actually think there is just too much legal misinformation out there, and I think it's at a really bad time for Canada. I think there's just like too much in the way of real misinformation. And Convoy Law, which I wrote, which is sort of blown up a little bit on Twitter, in the sense that my stuff ever blows up, thanks to Jan Arden retweeting it. Thank you, Jan. I'm a big fan, by the way. But because of that, it's really picked up, and it sort of caught the attention and sort of hit a nerve in terms of what the hell is going on, and sort of what do we mean, or what is the legal concepts that are being thrown around by these protesters. And what I tried to encapsulate in Convoy Law is really this idea that is being spread through all sorts of people, primarily protest organizers, but it's been picked up by, I don't want to know if I want to use the word reputable, but certainly by other sources. Like, these narratives about what the law is, the law of the convoy, is being picked up by some lawyers who argue in very peculiar ways, but also by mainstream politicians, etc. So I'm going to explore convoy law. And if you want to follow along as I go, you can go check out my Twitter page, because it's linked to my profile. So just go to my profile, and I've got I think it's 17 or 18 convoy laws. Now, let me just say, when I wrote these convoy laws, I was just doing a morning stream of consciousness. And when I redo these convoy laws, in book form, as I'm scheduled to do, they will be much more rationally organized. So these were just whatever I could think of off the top of my head. And it's occurred to me that really, I think it's convoy law 10 should really be convoy law number 1, or whatever. They're not quite all put together in the right way. And that doesn't really matter. So let me go through them with you. I think it'll be entertaining to talk about what the convoy laws are and how they actually work. Okay. So let's start with convoy law number 1. And here's how it reads. Anyone has the right to protest any way they want in a public space, regardless of other applicable laws. At the end of the day, protest trumps everything else. Well, this is one of the most important convoy laws, and it is stated over and over and over again. This is a protest. It's really at the core of everything. And this basic idea that something cannot be illegal if it's a protest. Therefore, the other laws don't apply. And it doesn't really matter what laws those are: parking laws, motor vehicle bylaws, criminal laws. None of these apply. And by the way, I'm just going to forget about the Emergencies Act for a moment. I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist because it's not really relevant to what I'm talking about. Like, they want to make it all about the Emergencies Act. Go to town. But I'm here just to tell you about convoy law, which is that if you are protesting, especially if you're protesting peacefully, no laws apply. And that is just complete and utter nonsense. It has no basis in any law that we've ever had. Moreover, it has never been true in the history of any country that I'm aware of. Never. It's never been true, but you hear it all the time. This is a peaceful protest, therefore don't move them away. You can't move away peaceful protests. Well, actually, like, you can always. Nobody has the right to protest wherever they want. That has never existed. And you can imagine why. Because if everybody could protest whenever and wherever and however they wanted, it would be complete anarchy, just like it was in Ottawa, just like it was at the Windsor Bridge, just like it was in Coutts, Alberta. That is what anarchy looks like. People deciding that they can do whatever they want so long as it's not violent. That's what they're saying, right? As long as we don't beat anybody up or hurt anybody, we can do whatever we want. We can set up a dance music stage and party till whatever time we want. We can play on our horns and hit them. We can do anything because it's a protest. This is completely nonsensical. And for the reasons, like, there are many good reasons, but I'll just spell out a few. One is we have a system that is defined by certain laws. Yes, protest is legal and should not be stopped. If they want to protest online, they can do that as freely as they want, so long as they don't transgress a few criminal laws like hate propaganda and stuff like that. Go crazy. Like Randy Hillier, tweet what you like. We'll get to that in a minute, but tweet what you like about the pandemic and vaccine mandates. I don't really care. I think that's how we have a healthy discourse. Now, we could go a little further. Do you want to protest like the guy who protests on 109th Street in my, city of Edmonton? There's a guy who's out there every day, just about, or every week, with his, sign about Jesus Christ being our savior. And he's on a loudspeaker and he speaks into it and he tells us how we are all, morally degraded and we're losing our future. Go for it. Like, I'm okay. That's a public space. He's doing it during the day. I don't think there are any bylaws he's breaking, and I encourage him to go crazy. It's kind of annoying when I pass by. I can't say I like what his message is, but that's what a free and democratic society is. If I want to go down tomorrow with my group of friends for whatever cause I want and stand in front of the Alberta legislature or stand in front of, Parliament Hill in normal times, I can protest. That is fair game. I have no issue with that. Stand on the sidewalk, go from noon till night. I don't think there are any special laws preventing you from doing that. Walk back and forth with your stuff. Keep it down because there are noise bylaws, but have fun, have at it. That's what protest is. Okay. And anyone can do that in any democratic society. Now, as I pointed out in one of my tweet threads yesterday, that doesn't give you the right to ignore all potential bylaws. So, for example, I have a public park in my neighborhood, and you have the right to go into that public park. I have the right to protest in that park. I can bring 20 people in and we can have our signs and protest and try and talk to people and give them leaflets. That's all fair game. Now, that doesn't mean I get to stay there overnight and protest. Like, the public park has a bylaw that says I can't be there between the hours of 10 and 6. Like, that is a law that's been put in place by the municipality, and I will break that. I can call it a protest, or I can call it Fred, or I can call it whatever I want. It does not change the underlying problem. You just don't get to decide which laws are going to apply to you and which don't. They just don't. And there is a concept in criminal law that makes that very clear. These protesters are operating under the delusion that they think it's a legal protest, so therefore it's lawful. Well, there is a very well-known concept in criminal law called ignorance of the law is no excuse. And you could wish it to be a protest all you want. It doesn't make it so. Ever. Ever. It's never been the case. So the reason why we don't allow this is quite straightforward. I'm going to give it 2 reasons. And by the way, those of you who are here, if you're enjoying this 12 minutes in, there's 26 of you, and I'm quite proud of that. But this is my Sunday afternoon, and I'm giving it up. If some of you could go over to Twitter or elsewhere and tell them that we're doing this and that you're enjoying it so far, I would be ever so delighted. Can anybody do that? If yes, give me like an icon or something. I'd be so happy if you would. Now, why is this not permitted? Like, why is this, a terrible idea? Because, like, in a society, if we take protests too far, we will have complete anarchy because there's no stopping it. It's not like certain ideologies get to protest and certain other ones don't. Like, that's just not the way this works. It doesn't, like, there's no content to the actual protest. Like, I don't really care what they're protesting. In my version, for example, I didn't even say what I was protesting. I don't know. Let's say I'm protesting for vaccine mandates to end, or I'm protesting for vaccine mandates to start, or I'm protesting for, the earth is flat. I don't really care. Everyone gets to protest. That's part of a free and democratic society. What you don't get to do is stop everything. Right? That's just the basic way it works. So the idea that protest trumps everything else is false. Okay? That is just the way it is. So I could say more, but I'm going to talk about, the Convoy Law number 2. Freedom is the most important principle in human society, giving everyone the absolute right to do whatever they want, subject to law number 3, which is violence, in the name of freedom. Well, again, like, I really wish this were true in some way, but on every other way in my body, I wish it were not. Like, I would love to have the freedom not to pay taxes. I know a lot of free men of the land wish they had that. I wish I had the freedom to have a party in my backyard whenever I wanted. That would be great for me. I wish I had the freedom to take my kids out of school whenever I wanted to. I sort of do have that freedom, but I try not to do it. And I wish I had the freedom to tell all these people, lots of things I'd love to tell them. But, like, I just don't have that freedom. Like, freedom is a great principle, but it's limited by other things. And what we saw in this convoy, this idea that in Ottawa, they were all free and everything was free. Well, first of all, everything was free because it was being supplied by others in terms of not actually paying for it. But leave that aside for just a minute. The idea that they can all live in harmony and freedom has never, ever worked, ever, in human society. Have you ever had a dispute with your neighbors over noise they're making or buildings? Like, people go to court for this all the time. Like, the reason they go to court for this all the time is because we're not very good at mixing freedoms. That's why we have rules. For God's sake, this idea that freedom means everything. Freedom is great. We have rules. I'm not even getting at the underlying craziness, really, because it is craziness of their dispute. You notice I'm talking content neutral. I'm not really going after vaccines are good, vaccines are bad, because I just don't want to get into that debate, and it's not really necessary. But the idea that you get to do whatever you want, like, we live in a democracy, in case I missed it, and unfortunately, these truckers do not have the support of enough of the population in any living place, except maybe Alberta, where things are a little woohoo. Like, I don't know what's going on here. They've managed to get really control of the province, but leaving outside Alberta, like, I don't think they have that. So this idea that freedom to do whatever you want trumps all is just never been in existence in human history. And thank God, because, like, we don't allow freedoms. That's why we have laws that are not enforced enough, apparently, but we do have laws. So this is really just craziness and makes no sense. All right. Violence against others, number 3, is strictly prohibited unless others try to stop you from exercising your freedoms. When that happens, violence is a viable form of self-defense. I've seen this enacted. I just tweeted about an example of Convoy Law number 3, because the protesters of the convoy love to say they're peaceful until someone else wants them to go somewhere. Then they're not peaceful. then a lot of them get very aggressive. But I mean, regardless, the principle itself, again, is idiotic. Violence against others being prohibited sounds great. I love it. Unless they try to stop you from exercising your freedoms. And what we saw in Ottawa, for example, is another manifestation of this when anti-protesters started coming down because they were fed up with what was going on. I hate to point out the obvious, but the reason why we have laws and the reason why we have governments is because we can't allow others to exercise their freedoms in any sort of unrestrained way. And the idea that they can do so and then can react violently when others try to do so is, again, just encouragement of complete anarchy. It's great as long as everyone believes in what you're saying. If everyone believes with you, that's great. Right? Air is good. Fantastic. Let's have a protest. Air is excellent. Fantastic. Everybody's on board. Air's great. I'm going to start a new protest group. Air is awesome. Water is good. We should all have water. Fantastic. We're all on board. But as soon as things get a bit more divisive, you're just encouraging people to start protesting. And not to mention, by the way, that the Convoy Laws 1, 2, and 3 are all nonsensical for another reason. Like, essentially what they're saying is protest to obtain what you want because no one can stop you. They've stopped borders for many, many weeks. And it was a Canadian disgrace. Why? Because, you're not allowed to do that. And we have good reasons why you're not allowed to do that. And if the convoyers can do it, why can't I? Why can't I? I disagree with lots of things. Why can't I protest about everything and anything under the sun? Why can't I go and with my little group of ragtag believers, and who cares whether it's big or small, though big seems better, right? And that's another thing about the convoy. It wasn't really that big in absolute terms. I pointed out to my daughter, we're both vegans, that if we got all the vegans in Canada and went to Ottawa, we'd swamp the city. If I could get every vegan in Canada to go argue for more animal, protections, we'd literally swamp the city. This is not a good idea. It's not the way things work. By all means, protest, organize, go and do a walk through Ottawa. Everybody has the right to do that. And I think they should do it. We should protest. We should say these things. But the idea that you just get to do it in any way you want, unless, it's complete anarchy. It makes no sense. What I'm trying to get at with these convoy laws is these are stated often, right? But they actually have literally no legal foundation. Zero. They're just based on flawed precepts. Convoy Law number 4 is really just an extension of this. As per Convoy Law number 2, health regulations and other types of government interference cannot stop the exercise of your freedom. Cook, feed yourself, sauna, and bathe at your convenience, all in the greater service of protest. Well, let me just say that was Ottawa in a nutshell. I'm not going to dig into this one in great length because no bylaws were adhered to. But there is a reason why we have health bylaws. And let me just stress, I'm sure the food in Ottawa was cooked beautifully and sterilized. I don't want to make this the be all and end all. No, nor do I want to be taken as saying, I don't want to be taken as saying that you can't do these things, right? Nor am I don't want to be saying that, the health regulations were the real problem. I'm just saying that we have health regulations for a reason. And those health regulations are to ensure that people sell food in a way that's safe and sanitary. And that is part of the problem. Somebody said, so basically status quo and establishment law is by definition lawful, since any challenge to the law will be fiercely opposed. Well, let me just say that establishment law, you mean the law enacted by the government, is lawful? Of course it is, until it's challenged in court, maybe under the Constitution. And the idea that any challenge to the law will be fiercely opposed, well, I'd imagine it would be, because that's what living in a democracy is. And as we've seen in our history of Canadian law, things are the law until they're not. That's the way, again, a democracy works. You get people to support your position on something that's wrong, and eventually those people come into power and those things get enacted. It's happened over and over and over again. To take an Alberta example, because you seem to be from Edmonton walks, I mean, the NDP governed Alberta for several years, and they put many policies in place, and those were the law. And they were rigorously defended, as they should be. They were voted into office and they enacted laws. Then when the Conservatives came back into office, They remove many of those laws. And I can tell you, if the NDP get back into power, they'll enact some of those laws. That's, the way a democracy works. It's happened in Ottawa over and over again. The Conservatives enact certain laws about certain things. I could give you 50 examples just in the criminal law area, and then they're revoked. I realize that to some people, democracy is disappointing and it doesn't work their way. Let me just stress, I'm one of those people. Sorry, I almost lost it there. Did I lose it there? I'm one of those people because I believe in certain things that are never done. We have too many mandatory minimum punishments. We have, not enough protection for animals. I could go on all day. I find the criminal code a complete, utter disgrace because it's hard to follow and confusing and has too many crimes in it. I'm one of those people. I'm disappointed in democracy. I mean, do you want me to start going on how I'm disappointed in what's going on in Alberta right now? It's complete nonsense. We're catering to the whims of a total minority and doing things that make no sense. Guess what? I can go protest. Of course I can. I can go protest and wave a sign. I can write about it on Twitter. I've been doing that. I've been saying how Jason Kenney is a complete disappointment in every sense of the word. That's my right. What I don't get to do is shut down the entire city of Edmonton. I could try, but I should go to jail for that. That's the way this works. This isn't new. This isn't like I've invented this yesterday. What's been invented is convoy laws. They make no sense. Let's go to number 5. Always encourage others to join the cause of freedom. The Canadian law of counseling has no application when a protest is involved. Push for others to join the cause at all times. So many people don't understand the law of counseling. Let me explain the law of counseling. So sensibly, Canadian law says we shouldn't be able to encourage others to commit crimes. So I am not going to tell anybody here, go kill your spouse if they're bugging you. I will not say that. I will not say that if your spouse is ticking you off, you should kill them. That would be ridiculous. I would never do that, right? Nor would I say, go attack someone in the convoy. I would never, ever, 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 ever do that because it's counseling. Counseling means that you are encouraging other people to commit crimes. Let me let you in on a little secret. Crimes are bad, right? And the convoy does not get to decide which crimes are bad. I hate to break it to you, but convoy laws 1 to 4 don't exist. They're not real laws. They're fake laws. Therefore, counseling others and encouraging them to break the law is a crime. That's why so many of the organizers have been charged with counseling. They've been charged with counseling because they're committing crimes. If you know that others are going to follow what you say and commit a crime, you're guilty of a crime. And quite frankly, by the way, I want to say that there are many crimes being broken. The focus has been on mischief. I would like to see greater focus on extortion. Mischief is a nice little crime because it covers the noise that went on in downtown Ottawa. Like, that's the crime of choice right now, and the crime of obstruction and failure to follow lawful orders like an injunction, right? They kept blowing their horns, and many politicians, including Randy Hillier, encourage them to do that. Come down and resist. Come down and stand in the way. Come down and don't lose your ground. More people come down and commit criminal offenses. I hate to break it to Randy and all those other people. That is counseling. It is. You're just not allowed to do that. He didn't say come down and protest. That's not counseling. Definitely not. He didn't say come down here and, stand in support. Didn't say that either. He said come down and resist. Well, that's counseling to commit a crime. And he's also been a part of the group that has been trying to make demands of we're not leaving until you do this. Well, let me tell you what extortion is. We all know what extortion generally is privately. The idea that if someone threatens you by taking these private snapshots of you, involved in some affair, and they then try to blackmail you for money, that's a crime. That's extortion. But extortion is much broader than that. Why should it be money? What if you are, you're my neighbor, okay? You're my neighbor, and you are regularly squatting on my lawn, right? Well, if I threaten you that I'm going to go, out one of your kids who's in the closet, a terrible thing to do that I would never do, but I'm just trying to make a threat. That's extortion. I'm threatening you with something that's improper, and there's a list of things that are improper. I've got the code here, so I might as well just look at it. I know. Threats, accusations, menaces, or violence induces or attempts to induce anyone, right, to do anything. That's what extortion is. We don't allow people to make threats or induce people or menace them. But that's what the convoy organizers have been doing. And that's what Randy Hillier's been doing. He wants people to drop mandates. That's something. He wants politicians to drop mandates. That's something. And he's threatening them with a continued convoy if they don't. Extortion. That's what it should be. That's punishment. It's punishable by life imprisonment. They would never get life. Let me be clear. But life imprisonment shows the seriousness of the crime. And that's what it is. Serious. So at the end of the day, do what we want, or you will be, punished in some way by what we're doing. So crimes are being committed all over the place, and people seem to think in the convoy that counseling has no application because it's a protest. So invite everybody on. There has been so much counseling. Honestly, there's no way for the police to prosecute at all, and I wouldn't either. I'm not going to get into who I would charge and why. I'm just not doing that because I've already done it. Listen to my podcast, Criminal Defense Essentials #2, and you will learn who I would protest. You see what happens to me? Who I would prosecute, why I would prosecute them, and what the reasoning is. So go listen to that. Convoy Law #6. Court orders from Canada do not override any of the convoy laws. They are at most optional. Freedom, as always, trumps all other considerations. Well, that was written in response to the injunction. An injunction is a lawful order that says you must stop doing something. It was issued by a court, which is the representative execution body. By execution body, I mean legislature makes the laws. Executive enforces the law through the power of the state, and the judiciary is the one that interprets whether a law is being broken and then has the power to issue orders, like an injunction, which is essentially saying stop breaking the law. Well, the convoy protesters believe they're not subject to court orders. So as a result, like if maybe because they haven't read them or they weren't addressed to them personally with a pretty please and a cherry on top, I don't know why, but they just believe they don't apply to us. They are incorrect. They do apply to you, and you're going to be sued civilly for all your breaches, and you're going to be punished criminally for all your breaches. Like that is the way this goes. So again, be more careful. Somebody's asked me about the Emergency Act. I'm not discussing that in this podcast. It's just I haven't studied it carefully because I've been busy trying to deal with the criminal law aspects of this. So I know that many people want to divert this into a discussion of the Emergencies Act because that's more fun, partly because that's more controversial. I agree with that too. I wouldn't have pushed for it. I would have used our regular freaking laws. Sorry, I get angry sometimes. Convoy Law #7. Police must be embraced as members of the protest until they become aggressive. At that point, Convoy Law #3 kicks in, defend your freedoms. Well, we saw Convoy Law #7 on display yesterday. The police are with us until they're not, and then they're the enemy. And again, that's just not the way life works. Well, it is the way life works. They become the enemy. But the idea that they are members of the protest is literally insane. And even though there are some police officers who acted inappropriately and seemed like members of the protest, that is just because individual people in any crisis can go wrong and will go wrong, and they should be punished accordingly. Anyone who supported the protest aggressively, I'm not talking about police at the scene who were trying to negotiate and de-escalate. I don't care what they said. But at the end of the day, the police who get aggressive, the police who were like encouraging should be punished like anybody else. And we've seen some of them on YouTube or other videos or whatever. At the end of the day, the police are not your friends and they're not necessarily your enemies. You don't get to defend your freedoms because the police are trying to move you out. Lots of people did that yesterday and lots of people were arrested quite properly. I don't like all the arrests. Let me be clear. I wish we had never, ever gotten to that point, but the people wouldn't leave and the police had to move. And they had a law to enforce, and they enforced it. I don't know. Like, again, do we live in a country of laws? Not convoy laws. Or what? I don't know. You tell me. Here we go. Convoy Law #8. Canadian police cannot arrest you for defending your freedoms. Any notice of such intention can be refused by refusing to read it or listen. Lack of knowledge of the law, however wishful, is a defense. I do think that's part of convoy law. I've seen it. Like every time the police tried to go in with notices saying this, that, or the other thing, like the police were rebuffed. We can't read that. Don't give me that trash. As if that somehow made their subsequent actions legal. And of course, it doesn't. Let me be clear that the police are under no obligation to notify you that you're breaking the law. I represent real clients, not protesters, real clients who are charged with all sorts of things. And I promise you, none of them were notified that you're selling drugs illegally, you're sexually assaulting someone illegally, you're doing this illegally. Nobody gets that courtesy. The police were trying to de-escalate the situation. They were not trying to tell you you're absolved of laws if you read this or don't read this. It's complete and utter nonsense. Lack of understanding of the law, as they will find out when conviction after conviction after conviction is imposed or plea bargains are reached. The defense lawyers representing this crew seem to be confident that for some reason or another, they're going to get them off. I am not in any way confident. I'm convinced that most of them will be convicted unless there's a lack of proof. There might be a lack of proof with regard to certain protesters. I concede that might be the case. But this optimism of we're going to show that the whole thing was unlawful, good luck. I look forward to watching that. It would essentially mean that the law of Canada does not exist as I know it to exist. I've spent my whole life, more or less my adult life examining it. But what the hell do I know? Let's listen to some, commercial litigator in Edmonton who seems to think that he can just dictate what the law actually is, that you can protest as long as you want, so long as you're peaceful. It's just complete and utter nonsense. And just, I'm embarrassed that any member of the profession is actually pushing it. It's really nonsense. Okay, make as much noise as you want. Freedom trumps all in the name of protest. Look, I'm reiterating myself, right? These are just like the same laws. I told you I can probably condense these down to 10. Make as much noise as you want. That's called mischief or causing a disturbance or breaching a lawful order, whichever. Like at the end of the day, and of course, if you're making all that noise to provoke regime change, it's extortion. Like that's the way it goes. I hate to break it to you, but as much as my younger partying self would love it to be true, you don't get the right to make as much noise as you want in society. Certainly not by pumping air horns because you delight in that crazy, eardrum shattering sound. It just doesn't work that way. Number 10, being friendly to others is the key to a lawful protest. If you're friendly and you do not cause physical violence except resisting, you cannot be charged with any Canadian criminal offense. Again, this is just another variation of protest, right? Protest is acceptable, so therefore we can do whatever we want in the name of protest. I am delighted that most of these protesters were friendly. I really am. That's why I defended them. Well, you're going to believe this, to the limited extent of arguing quite strongly that everybody who wanted to read the Riot Act was mistaken. I believe in the law. I know it's fucking quaint, isn't it? It's a crazy idea. I believe in where the law takes me. And while I read person after person saying, read the Riot Act, clean them out, they're all rioters, it's an unlawful assembly, I looked at the law and I was not convinced, and I'm still not convinced that there was ever a riot in progress. And I think that equating this to a riot, as unruly as it was, or as disgusting as some of the individual actions of the protesters might have been, delegitimizes those who support the law as much as the opponents delegitimize it by applying convoy law. There was no riot. I will defend their non-riotousness, right? To the end. We have to apply the laws as they are in force. So yeah, being friendly, I am so happy they were friendly. I think this could have devolved into a much nastier situation. We're lucky we got out of this as cleanly as we did. It really could have devolved. I think had the citizens of Ottawa been left with this another week, they would have taken it into their own hands, and then we would have had a riot. We would have prosecuted all of them. Like, this is not a good idea. And let me just stress, I've been in a riot. I lived in Montreal in 1993 when the Canadiens won the Stanley Cup, and I was celebrating in a friendly crowd outside until it turned into a riot. It is scary. It is crazy. It has a force of its own. That's what a riot is. This was not a riot. It was a ridiculous party slash whatever it was. I'm not going to call it a protest, but it wasn't a riot. So being friendly doesn't change things. You can be as friendly as you want. I'm a friendly guy. I can walk up to somebody and I guess I couldn't friendly punch them in the face, but I could be super friendly and steal all their money through a fraud or a theft. It doesn't change anything. It just means that on sentencing, when it comes time to be sentenced for the stupidity of my actions, I will not receive extra punishment because I didn't cause extra harm. That's it. And, if these guys were friendly and they were arrested in a friendly way, I'm sure the judge will make note of the fact that they did not cause extra harm. Doesn't let off the harm they did cause through their actions. Since the protest has Canadian politicians like our leader, Randy Hillier, on side, the protest is lawful. Any attempt to stop the protest by force is thus unlawful. Well, again, that's just complete nonsense. I don't really care that Randy Hillier managed to get elected in some part of Ontario. I suppose that's up to the choice of the people who live in that part of Ontario. And I will say no more about that. But that is deeply, deeply disturbing that a man with that level of contempt for Canadian law is somehow in a position to do something about some part of Canadian law. It's a very little part. He's one MPP in a part of Ontario and not part of the majority party. So, he doesn't really have that much power. But I think we should be worried that people like him and Maxime Bernier have some level of support. I don't think they'll ever get elected. I certainly hope none of them ever get elected, but who knows? That is a real threat. That is something we need to look at. I do think there are real concerns arising from the convoy, but I'm just a law professor. I'm not a political scientist, a sociologist. I don't study that. What I can tell you is I don't really care if Canadian politicians are on side. Trust me, if the Conservative MPs had gone a little farther, I'd say charge them too. I don't think they crossed the line as much as many people want them to. I really don't. I don't think they have gone that far. Even Poilievre is careful enough to say he supports the protest, but not necessarily anything else. Like, it's close. And you've got to be able to prove that there was real encouragement of the illegal activity, not the protest part of the illegal activity. And I think he's too clever. I did a deep dive, for example, today on Jordan Peterson. Just to give you a split up, if you follow my Twitter feed, I did two things today. I did a deep dive on this guy, Ryan O'Connor, who is a Edmonton lawyer. And he's not, I don't think he's necessarily counseling. And I wouldn't say that he was. I didn't go far enough. He blocked me. He's just saying things that are legally crazy. And I did say that. And I'll say that again and again and again and again and again and again and again. They were crazy, 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 crazy. They were Freedom Convoys Law 1, 2, 3. Randy Hillier, I did a deep dive. He is counseling. He has encouraged people to come to the zone and resist. He did that 2 days ago. He has encouraged people to go to the blockades and resist. That is counseling. No question. I think he should be charged and charged soon. Like, that is just the way it is. Jordan Peterson's been more careful, and I'm sure that people will send me tweets that might be to the contrary, but I've looked at his tweets and he's much more careful. He's savvy. You're allowed to condemn Trudeau. You can call Trudeau names. That's a free society. You can do all kinds of things. You can say, I support the protesters. Okay, I think you can do that. I think it's wrong, but I think you can do that. We don't like it, but you can do that. You can say, I agree with what they're arguing for. This law is a disgrace. I'm against freedom vaccine mandates. I'm against vaccines. I'm against this. I'm against that. Go crazy. All those things. Counseling is hard to prove for good reason. We don't want to criminalize expression. I don't. I hate it. I'm against criminalization. I am. Really, I'm a defense lawyer. I think we have too many crimes. I don't want to criminalize this stuff. When do I want to criminalize it? When Randy Hillier and Pat King and some of those people are literally trying to get people successfully to come break the law. That's too much. We can't allow that to happen, especially not by an MPP with 55,000 followers. That is just really troubling. I don't get to do that either. I haven't encouraged any of you to break the law. I've encouraged you not to break the law. Don't break the law. Don't break the law. Very interesting. I'm just wondering about the permits required prior to any demonstration. Could that impede on freedom of expression enshrined in Section 2 of the Charter? Sure, it can. Absolutely. Get a permit. It's too restrictive. Challenge it. I know that will take forever, but that is our system of democracy and the judicial review. Try and have it reviewed. No doubt. Can Randy Hillier be arrested? I don't know. I've only tweeted hashtag arrest Randy Hillier. I think I was one of the first people to do it. I've been doing it for weeks. Like, I listened to a couple of his speeches. I think they're counseling. I think he wants to be a star of the show by making himself the press conference leader. And as such, he's got to pay the price for that. So can he? Yes. Will he? I don't know. I don't run the show, but I'm just telling you that. Yes, we can do all kinds of things. And I perfectly recognize, and it's an imperfect system and kind of frustrating. Laws, let me just tell you, it's Shireen, I think. Laws are really frustrating. I get frustrated by laws all the time. For example, when I get taxed by the government and I don't think it's fair, they assess me and I've got to go fight it and go through the legal system. And it takes a lot of time and all my money's tied up and like all that stuff. It's terrible. You get caught in the criminal justice system, even if you're innocent. It's terrible. You get sucked up in it. It ruins your life. You know, I have a client getting acquitted on something. Like, it's terrible. Yeah, that's the way it is. You want to go do it, but that's our system of law. If it impedes on freedom of expression, you can challenge the restrictions on the protests. Go for it. If they wanted to do that, I would support them. But they don't get to lock down Ottawa for a week. Like, it just weeks. Doesn't happen. They don't get to put out their hot tubs and their stuff. No, no, no. Okay, next is going along. Any grammatical errors in a police notice to end the protest render such notice nugatory. Search for such grammatical errors to raise in Canadian court if protest is ended. Let me just say that will not be in the book. Mea culpa. That's really on me, right? I was really poking fun at the Ottawa police for a grammatically incorrect notice. So my bad. There is some idea out there that if the notice isn't signed or signed by the Queen or signed by all sorts of other dictator people or whatever, then they don't have legal effect. That's just nonsense. But the grammatical thing is just my bad. It's just having fun. As always, freedom and protest trump everything else except smuggling guns. That's bad. By the way, I've gone on about Coots a lot. It's funny how Coots gets no attention. You're going to listen to this. I think the guns in Coots were troubling on a number of levels. Obviously, they were troubling because they showed we have some really disturbed people involved in these movements. That's number one. Number two, they're disturbing because people could have died. That's number two. But are you ready for number three? It's a converse disturbing. I'm not happy about those guns because they have deflected attention from the border blockade in Coots. And I don't want to say they've let all the organizers off the hook because I don't know that that's true. People take time to sometimes charge, and that may take a while. I don't really know. Like, I don't know one way or another. I hope so, that it's not going to end charges and that, you know, there will eventually be charges in Coots because I think that's essential for the leaders. But like, that really bothers me. It's not about that. They blocked the border and made demands. That was extortion. There was no doubt that the people involved there were all parties to extortion. Drop vaccine mandates and do other things, or we will block the border. I don't understand how that's not extortion, because they drive trucks, because they're nice people, because they're friendly. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, it just doesn't make sense. What about the area of law that suggests the things politicians say aren't really taken serious by a reasonable person? Civil context, a promise by a politician isn't really a promise. I don't think that applies here. And I say that because at the end of the day, he wasn't just a politician. He was speaking at length. At length. That was really something that I think crosses the line. It's not a promise. He was counseling. I don't think there's a politician's defense to counseling, or that any reasonable person wouldn't do it, because lots of reasonable people did it. And I guarantee you, James, we have evidence, because I've heard of it. I've been sent tweets that say, I'm doing this because Randy told me to. Like, that's counseling, right? Randy called us down. That's why we're going. I had people forward me tweets and posts from Facebook saying I did this because of Randy. Like, I'm sorry. I don't think there's any defense to that. Sorry, off topic. I got to finish these first. I'll get back to these quickly. Let's go. What else do we got? When in doubt, sing "O Canada." Convoy law demands that every officer hug you. Again, that's a bit of a reference to Coots, but apparently singing "O Canada" is a get out of jail free card. As it turns out, of course, it's not. Why should it be? You can sing "O Canada" all you like. I'm sure you're very patriotic in your own way, but like that doesn't change the law. Convoy Law number 14 is disturbing, and it's true. Canadians who stand for freedom and support us are real Canadians. All other people living in Canada are fake Canadians who don't get freedoms. Well, ultimately, that is the fallacy that's at the core of all the convoy laws. And I've gotten this myself. I'm not a real Canadian. Karima Saeed's not a real Canadian. We're not real Canadians because we don't support your cause. I don't know. That's just insanity. That's not how a society works. I don't support lots of other people's stuff. That doesn't make them non-Canadians. I don't support these convoy people. I would never say they're not Canadians. If they're Canadians, they're Canadians. That's the way it works. We don't agree with each other. We disagree. I've lived in Quebec for years. I was part of 2 referendums in Quebec. I didn't agree with a lot of people I knew. It doesn't make them not Canadians. Just complete utter nonsense. And that is convoy law. The Pat King law number 15 is sort of ridiculous and stupid because Pat King is kind of ridiculous and stupid. Like that's just the way it works. Wave a white shirt and police can't arrest you because of international law is just utter stupidity. It has no basis in any law anywhere. I don't know if it's some war law that if you wave a white flag, you surrender. I don't know what the hell it has to do with any sort of arrest or stupidity or lie down the ground and be prone. Like all these things are just variations of complete utter nonsense that I wish my clients had access to. I really do, because they would get off a lot easier for the crimes they're committing. My clients are never guilty. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Finally, 2 of the newer ones that are really troubling is that the fake news media must be harassed and yelled at. Assault optional, but legal. Only real media like Fox and Rebel News deserve respect and must be obeyed at all times. I don't even know where to start with this, but I'm disturbed by it as a former journalism graduate who was in the media for a brief time. I'm disturbed. I think attacks on the media are dangerous for everybody. I was unable to watch some of the protests because the media were harassed out of there. We need to see what's going on. And the constant harassment, verbal abuse, sometimes physical, like certainly getting in the proximity, which seems like various types of assault. You don't need to touch someone for it to be an assault. I saw plenty of assault out there by people who were getting in the faces and spaces of journalists, and some of them screaming insults. Like, let me stress, screaming insults at journalists is unfortunately, I don't think it's unlawful in the ordinary sense. It's disgusting, but not unlawful. Screaming various things like fake news is part of what they do. I think it's unfortunate, but I don't think that's unlawful either. But I do think that the trend of it is really troubling. And I do think that this idea of attacking all mainstream media, and the version of mainstream media as anyone who doesn't agree with your view, is deeply disturbing. It's really something we need to be aware of in our country. Finally, the most important legal instrument, this is a new one in Canada, is the Canadian Bill of Rights 1960. Next is the Magna Carta. The Canadian Charter is referred to only when convenient. Nothing can override the Canadian Bill of Rights. Well, like somebody wrote to me on Twitter, and therefore it must be correct, it's Twitter, that the Canadian Bill of Rights is a fiction. It's an American Bill of Rights. We don't have a Bill of Rights. Well, that's not true. We do have a Canadian Bill of Rights, just nobody ever remembers it because it doesn't have much use. And let me just say, back in the 90s, when I worked, I was doing legal research and the Canadian Charter was still relatively new. I was always intrigued by the Canadian Bill of Rights. I thought it had some really interesting provisions that are worded much differently and in some ways more expansively than the Canadian Charter. But like the Canadian Bill of Rights is just a statute. Like Pierre Trudeau, with the support of just about any party, could repeal it tomorrow. He wouldn't do that. Sorry, Pierre Trudeau. Justin Trudeau. Any government could. You want to get rid of the Canadian Bill of Rights? No problem. Just repeal it. It's not a constitutional document. It's never used except by protesters. It doesn't really make any sense. There's nothing to it. It is a statute. It's an interesting statute, and I like it. But the idea that it supersedes the charter is just complete convoy nonsense. It does not. It has no force. I don't know why they like it so much. It's not actually stronger or better than the charter. It's actually weaker than the charter. It's regularly ignored. It has been for years. So, like, the charter is the Canadian constitutional rights document. It has actual force. It doesn't allow protesters to do what they want, but nor does the Canadian Bill of Rights. So, like, there's just no legal validity to this. That's 17 rules that have literally no validity whatsoever, or are just expanded psychobabble of like principles that have some degree of legitimacy. Like, for example, peaceful protest is good. I agree. Peaceful protest is good. We should have peaceful protests always. But unfortunately, the convoy doesn't get to decide what peaceful means, nor does peaceful protest. Just because I like peaceful protests over violent protests does not mean I allow all peaceful protests. If it did, I could go to, Randy Hillier's house and park outside his driveway on the public street and just protest indefinitely because I think he's a vile person or that I think he's a terrible politician. I don't get to do that because we have rules. This really isn't Vietnam. There are rules. Does anybody remember that quote? It's not Vietnam. There are rules. Well, that's just the way it is. I know these rules are terribly inconvenient for people who don't like them, but that's why we have actual rules. So, I'm going to end this lovely podcast. I'm so delighted that so many of you came in to join me, and I will, this will be available as an audio stream on my podcast feed, and it stays up here on YouTube. You can also watch it as a video, like, once I finish the stream. But I just, that's where I end it with, like, what I'm really concerned about is that we are having to even debate things that have this little merit. I literally got into a debate with a lawyer today about, what peaceful protest allows you to do. And he eventually just blocked me because he didn't have any better arguments. But he is continuing to reach 26,000 convoy people who support him and say things that are completely invalid. They just are. They have legal bits and pieces attached to them, but they're not law. They're convoy law. And again, all these things have bits and pieces attached to them. You can defend yourself if someone attacks you. It's true. You have the freedom to protest. Also true. Nonviolent protest is good. Also true. But they're divorced of context. They have no meaning because they're stupid. And they have, what they really are is scary. Because what I've learned in these times is people are attracted to ideas that have no sense. And it's hard to get them off those ideas. And look how much work it's taken me to explore this. And I'm a law professor. Imagine when we're dealing with more complicated things like the Emergencies Act, where there is real controversy. That's a real issue. But the idea that you have the right to peaceful protest is not a real issue. It deserves no serious consideration. It has never been the law. You are not immune from the criminal code because you call yourself a peaceful protester. Never have been, never will be, and thank God. I don't want to say thank God. It's just an expression because, like, I'm worried I'll be associated with the, God doesn't allow that. That's what's part of the convoy. So I will end there, and I will thank you all for coming today. If you enjoyed this, I'm back every Thursday doing this, and I hope you will support this podcast because I'm trying to get more information out there. But that's a lot for me. 55 minutes of me going on is a lot of time. Take care, stay well, and remember one thing. This stuff matters. We're in a real... I don't get pessimistic easily, but we are in a real troubling time. And I'm not sure where this is going, but I do know that the misinformation that's out there is a problem, and we need to talk to people even if we don't agree with them. I don't think I'm going to change minds. I think the people who are here are already accepting of what I'm saying, but maybe I've given you some tools to speak with people you do know who are on the fence, because I've tried to do that. All right, everybody, take care of yourself. Have a great day.